Something about that place was never right. Not the cold, not the snow, not even the silence. It was what stopped being there. Just 1 minute ago, word spread that someone finally stepped inside Marty Meierotto's old trapline hut. The door hadn't been opened in years. No lights, no tracks, no reason to go back until now. What was found inside didn't look violent. It didn't look dramatic. And somehow, that made it worse. People expected decay. Instead, they found signs of interruption. A life paused, not ended. Tools left behind. Order broken. Small details that didn't match the man everyone thought they knew. Marty was careful, methodical. He didn't abandon things. He didn't leave loose ends. Yet the hut told a different story. One that felt heavy, quiet, and deeply wrong. No official report explained it. No clear answer followed. Those who saw the inside didn't argue. They didn't debate. They simply stopped talking. Some refused to return. Others wouldn't even say his name out loud. This isn't about rumors or wild guesses. It's about what remains when the truth refuses to surface, and why that silence hurts more than any answer ever could. Stay with us. Because what was discovered in that hut changes everything people believed about Marty Meierotto, and the full truth is finally coming out. Marty Meierotto was built on routine. Marty Meierotto wasn't just surviving in Alaska, he was shaped by it. Life in the far north doesn't forgive mistakes, and Marty understood that better than most. Viewers of Mountain Men saw a man who trusted order more than luck. His days followed a steady rhythm. He woke before the light fully reached the snow. He checked his traps in the same pattern every time. He repaired tools before they broke, not after. To Marty, routine wasn't boring. It was protection. Out there, help could be days away, sometimes longer. A small mistake could turn serious fast. Marty believed that habits saved lives. When everything around you is unpredictable, the weather, the animals, the land itself, your own system becomes the only thing you can control. That mindset guided everything he did. That's why his trapline hut mattered so deeply. It wasn't just a roof over his head. It was a place of order in a world built on chaos. Inside that hut, everything had a reason to be where it was. His tools weren't scattered. They were placed with purpose. Supplies were counted carefully and never wasted. Food, fuel, and gear were managed with the same care he gave his traps. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was careless. Marty didn't leave things half-finished. If something was started, it was meant to be completed. People who knew him noticed that about him right away. He wasn't the kind of man who walked away from his routine without a reason. That's what made the silence stand out later. When weeks passed without anyone seeing him, there was no immediate fear. Marty had always moved in and out of the wild on his own terms. Disappearing for a while was part of who he was. Friends and neighbors were used to that. The land was his space, and he knew it well. But this time felt different. The silence lingered longer than usual. There were no signs that said he was still moving through his patterns. No tracks. No familiar clues that hinted he was nearby. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet in a way that didn't fit him. People close to Marty didn't start rumors. They didn't rush to conclusions. They simply noticed the absence of things they expected to see. And that absence didn't match the man they thought they understood. That's when the questions began. Not spoken, but felt. The hut didn't tell a normal story. When the trapline hut was finally checked, people expected damage. They thought years of snow and wind would have torn it apart. Some believed animals might have forced their way inside. Others imagined it would be empty and lifeless. But none of that matched what they saw. The hut was still standing. The walls were firm. The roof held its weight. At first glance, it looked almost untouched, as if it had been waiting. That first impression didn't last long. Once inside, the details began to feel wrong. Not loud or obvious, just quiet and unsettling. Some items were not where they normally belonged. A few tools were left out when Marty usually kept them stored. Other things, items he never traveled without, were still there. That alone raised questions. Marty planned carefully. He didn't forget important gear, especially in a place where forgetting could cost you your life. The stove was cold, but it didn't look abandoned for years. The ashes weren't ancient. It suggested that a fire had burned there not too long ago, then simply stopped. The gear didn't look damaged. It looked used, then left behind. Nothing appeared broken in anger or panic. It was more like someone paused in the middle of doing what they always did. There were no signs of a long struggle, no broken walls, no deep marks on the floor. No clear message left behind to explain anything, no note, no warning, no final words scratched into the wood. Just small details that didn't match when seen together. Each one alone meant little. Together, they felt heavy. People who went in expected answers. They thought the hut would explain what happened. Instead, it only deepened the mystery. It didn't tell a story of chaos or violence. It told a story of interruption, a routine that stopped without explanation. That made it harder to accept. Clear endings are easier to understand. This wasn't clear. It felt unfinished, like a sentence that ends halfway through. Those who stepped inside didn't stay long. Not because they were scared in the usual sense. There was no obvious threat. But the air felt thick, quiet in a way that pressed on you. As if the hut was holding on to something personal, something it wasn't ready to release. People walked out with more questions than they had when they went in. And that feeling followed them long after they left. Why silence spread? Faster than facts. What happened next didn't follow the usual pattern of news or gossip. There were no dramatic statements shouted across town. No official reports were delivered in detail. Nothing that would normally make headlines. Instead, there was just silence. A silence that was unusual, heavy, and somehow louder than words. People who had seen the hut didn't speak much about what they found. They didn't lie, and they didn't try to explain away anything either. They simply chose not to talk. In a place like Alaska, silence is often a form of respect. It's a way of letting things be. But sometimes, silence is more than that. It can also cause discomfort, a quiet unease that spreads faster than words ever could. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, rumors began to surface. They weren't the exaggerated, wild kinds of stories you might expect. These were careful, whispered thoughts shared in hushed tones. Some people wondered if Marty had left on purpose, choosing to step away from everything he had built in that remote wilderness. Others questioned whether he had ever intended to return. A few observers noticed something strange about the hut itself. It looked prepared, orderly, as though someone had paused mid-action. Not abandoned, not forgotten, just waiting. These little details, small and subtle, began to circulate quietly through conversations. The most surprising part, though, was how quickly people started avoiding the subject altogether. Simple, casual discussions about the area, the land, or the traps would suddenly shift if Marty's name came up. People lowered their voices or changed topics entirely. Even the paths leading to the hut, usually traveled without hesitation, saw fewer steps. The trail stopped seeing traffic. Regular visitors and trappers who had gone near the area for years suddenly avoided it. It was as if the hut itself had created an invisible boundary. What made this more striking was who chose silence. These were people accustomed to danger, people who faced storms, bears, and isolation regularly. For them, curiosity often meant survival. Yet even they chose distance over investigation, and that spoke volumes. When those who are used to facing the wild, the cold, and the unknown decide not to approach something, it sends a clear message without a single word being spoken. The silence became its own story. It carried meaning, weight, and suspicion. It hinted at something unusual, something that perhaps no one fully wanted to uncover. The quiet spread faster than any explanation, faster than any fact. And in the end, the silence itself became louder than the discovery. People didn't need to say much. Their avoidance, their whispered comments, and the empty trail told everything that mattered. It was a warning, subtle but unmistakable, that whatever was inside Marty's hut was not something to be taken lightly. The hush surrounding it held a tension that words could never fully capture. The emotional weight. Nobody expected. What made Marty's trapline hut so heartbreaking wasn't any single object left behind. It wasn't a broken tool or a misplaced piece of gear. It wasn't even the cold stove or the half-empty mug. The true weight came from a deeper realization, a sense that Marty may never have known his last day would actually be his last. Every detail inside the cabin suggested that he expected to return. Everything was in order, almost ready for him to continue his routine the very next day. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't a sign of struggle or abandonment. It was a frozen moment, paused, as if time itself had decided to hold its breath. Walking through that small, carefully maintained space, it became clear that Marty had lived in continuity, not in abrupt endings. The supplies were counted, tools were organized. Notes and traps remained in place. Every piece of his life had been left with purpose. The hut didn't speak of closure. It whispered of expectation. It suggested that Marty believed tomorrow would come as it always did, that he would wake, check his traps, and go on with the life he had built in the harsh Alaskan wilderness. There was no sign that he anticipated his final day, no warnings, no preparation for a goodbye. That truth hit everyone who saw it harder than any dramatic discovery could. For viewers who followed him on Mountain Men, the impact was even stronger. They had watched a man who was never reckless, never careless. Marty was methodical, deliberate, and grounded in ways that kept him alive where most would struggle. He was a man who treated every winter, every frozen night, and every challenge with respect and planning. To see that careful world suddenly paused, left unfinished, unsettled more than curiosity, it created a quiet ache. The realization that Marty's routine, which had been the heartbeat of his survival, was interrupted by something none of them could explain, added a new layer of sorrow. This feeling wasn't about danger prevailing. It wasn't about a bear, a storm, or the cold finally taking its toll. Marty had always survived the unpredictable. What made it devastating was the uncertainty. The hut held on to that uncertainty, leaving everyone who entered it with questions. There was no closure. No ending is written in stone. Only the evidence of a life abruptly paused, as if the world outside had kept moving while his small corner of it had stopped. That kind of uncertainty lingers longer than visible damage, and sometimes it weighs more heavily. It leaves a space for imagination to fill in the blanks, for minds to wander to possibilities that are too uncomfortable to face. In the end, the emotional weight of Marty's trapline hut came from the tension between preparation and interruption. It wasn't the cold or the isolation that hurt. It was the understanding that Marty's world, so meticulously built, hadn't prepared him or anyone for what had come next. That quiet pause, that unfinished story, is what left a mark on every person who stepped inside. It's a weight that can't be measured, only felt, lingering long after they left the cabin behind. What the hut represents. Now today, Marty Meierotto's Trapline hut isn't just another log structure hidden in the vast wilderness of Alaska. It has grown into something much larger than itself. A symbol that carries layers of meaning for anyone who hears the story or walks near its silent walls. At first glance, it seems ordinary. A small cabin, sturdy in design, weathered by snow and wind over the years. But anyone who knows Marty, or has seen the details left behind, understands that it represents much more. It's a reminder that isolation can be both protective and revealing, showing the limits of control and the presence of uncertainty, even in someone as careful as Marty. The hut also stands as a symbol of strength. Marty's life was built on routines, planning, and resilience. He respected the dangers of the wilderness and worked with them, not against them. Every plank, every tool, every organized corner in that cabin reflected a man who had adapted completely to one of the harshest environments on Earth. It wasn't just a place to sleep, it was the foundation of survival. People looking at the hut now see that. They see how much effort it took to live that life. The walls, standing firm against snow and wind, seem to echo the endurance of the man who built them. Even empty, even quiet, the hut radiates a kind of stoic power, the result of years spent mastering a world where mistakes could be fatal. Yet, despite the strength and structure, the hut also represents the unknown. No one truly knows what happened that day or why Marty didn't return in the way everyone expected. Some suggest he left voluntarily. Others wonder if an accident or something unforeseen intervened. And maybe the real truth is that no one will ever know. That uncertainty has become part of what the hut signifies. It holds unanswered questions, a quiet weight of curiosity that presses on anyone who steps nearby. There are no signs of a struggle, no clear explanations, just an environment frozen in time, as if the last moments were simply paused, leaving a gap between expectation and reality. The physical presence of the hut remains powerful. Snow still blankets its roof during the long winters. The forest and the trails around it shift with the seasons. Animals wander through the clearing. Life continues in the wilderness, as it always does. But the feeling attached to that small structure has not faded. It draws people into reflection, making them think not just about survival, but about the fragility of human plans and the inevitability of uncertainty. Marty's careful routines, once a shield against the dangers of nature, now serve as a silent testament to how even the most prepared life can leave unanswered moments behind. For those who follow the story, the hut is more than history, it's a lesson. It reminds people that survival stories don't always reach tidy conclusions. Some don't end with explanations, triumphs, or closure. Sometimes they end with silence, and with the heavy weight of possibilities that were never realized. The unanswered questions hover in the cold air, linger in the trees, and echo across the snow. Marty Meierotto's Trapline hut stands as a quiet monument to endurance, to mystery, and to the understanding that life, even when meticulously planned, can leave moments that nobody can fully explain. It's a place that holds a story, paused, a life interrupted, and a reminder that the wilderness never fully gives up its secrets. Even years later, anyone who visits or hears about the hut senses the gravity. It is no longer just a cabin. It is a symbol of resilience, mystery, and the silent power of uncertainty, the kind that can teach more than any explanation ever could. Marty Meierotto didn't leave behind a dramatic ending. He left behind a pause. And maybe that's why the story still lingers. The Trapline hut tells a quiet truth about life in the wilderness. Not every chapter closes cleanly. Not every strong person gets a final explanation. Sometimes, all that remains is a space where routine stopped and questions began. For fans of mountain men, this isn't just about curiosity. It's about respect. Marty lived his life on his own terms, far from noise and attention. And even now, his story refuses to be loud. What was found in that hut doesn't shock, because it's extreme. It hurts, because it feels unfinished. Because it suggests plans that never got completed. Days that were expected, but never came. Maybe the real heartbreak isn't what was discovered inside the hut, but what was never discovered at all. And as long as that cabin stands quietly in the Alaskan wilderness, the question remains. Not shouted, not forced. Just waiting. If this story made you pause, stay with us. Because some truths don't arrive all at once, and the quiet ones often matter the most.